The days of an iron block supercharged 6.2-liter V8 are numbered. That's Dodge CEO Tim Kuniskis, 2022, standing in front of a crowd of gearheads in Pontiac, Michigan, telling them the thing they love is about to die. Not because it failed, because it worked too well on the wrong side of a spreadsheet. December 2023, the Brampton Assembly Plant in Ontario, Canada. The last gas-powered Dodge Challenger SRT Demon 170 rolls off the line. 1,025 horsepower. The most powerful factory muscle car ever built. It was not a farewell. It was a limited edition death certificate. Stellantis printed it, numbered it, and charged a premium for it. Then they shut the line down. What came next was supposed to be a golden age. Kuniskis said so himself. An electric Charger Daytona with 670 horsepower and a feature Dodge called a Fratsonic chambered exhaust, which is a polite way of saying they bolted a speaker to an electric car to simulate the sound of an engine it no longer had. By the first quarter of 2025, the Charger Daytona was selling 22 units per day across the entire United States. Dealers were slashing prices by more than $25,000. Over 3,500 sat unsold on lots. And here's the number that should stop you. In that same quarter, Dodge sold 1,974 of the old gas-powered Chargers and Challengers, cars that had been out of production for more than a year, versus 1,947 of the brand-new electric Daytona. Discontinued muscle cars, some still lingering on dealer lots from 2023, outsold their own replacement. So the obvious question, if the car people actually wanted was still moving, why was it killed? The answer is not EVs. It's not consumer taste. It's not the future arriving on schedule. The answer is a 50-year-old regulatory loophole, a mountain of compliance fines, and a profit structure that made the muscle car, no matter how well it sold, more expensive to keep alive than to bury. And if that sounds new, it isn't. Because they killed the muscle car before. Same way. Same logic, same excuse. Rewind to 1970. A Pontiac GTO with a 400 cubic inch V8 made 366 horsepower. By 1974, the same engine produced 200. Not because the engineering got worse, because the Clean Air Act, catalytic converters, unleaded fuel mandates, and the 1973 OPEC oil embargo collectively strangled it. Insurance companies piled on, jacking premiums on anything classified as a performance vehicle. Congress passed CAFE, corporate average fuel economy, standards in 1975, requiring automakers to hit fleet-wide fuel economy targets or pay fines. But here is where the real story starts. CAFE was designed with a carve-out. Trucks and SUVs, classified as light trucks, got softer fuel economy targets than passenger cars. The logic at the time seemed innocent. Trucks were work vehicles, farm equipment, commercial tools. They needed more fuel, so regulators gave them breathing room. What nobody predicted, or maybe some people predicted perfectly well, was that this loophole would reshape the entire American car market for half a century. Lee Iacocca was one of the first to see it. He pushed the minivan as a light truck replacement for the station wagon. Chrysler's PT Cruiser, a car by any reasonable definition, got classified as a truck. The game was on. By 2021, 63% of new vehicles sold in America were classified as light trucks. Ford announced in 2018 it was killing nearly all of its sedans, the Focus, the Fusion, the Taurus, to focus on trucks and SUVs. GM followed, axing the Cruze, the Impala, the Volt, the LaCrosse. The big three didn't just shift their lineups. They abandoned an entire category of vehicle because the regulatory math made it a liability. And muscle cars, classified as passenger cars, sat squarely on the wrong side of that math. Higher standards, higher fines, higher compliance costs. Every Challenger that rolled off the lot dragged the fleet average down and pushed the penalty bill up. Every Ram truck, every Jeep Grand Cherokee, Every bloated crossover classified as a light truck played by gentler rules. A Morgan Stanley study found that for both GM and Ford, only a handful of models, almost all trucks and SUVs, generated meaningful profit. Ford's bottom 37 models lost an average of nearly $800 per vehicle. Sedans weren't just unpopular, they were structurally punished. The muscle car wasn't killed by the market. The market was shaped around a regulatory structure that made the muscle car expendable. And the automakers didn't just accept that structure, they lobbied to preserve it. The truck loophole survived the Obama administration's redesign of fuel economy standards. It survived the Biden administration's tighter rules. Every time regulators had a chance to close the gap between car and truck standards, industry lobbyists made sure it stayed open, because closing it would have destroyed the profit engine that kept Detroit alive. But for about 15 years, Dodge pretended it could fight the math with volume and attitude. Starting in 2008, Dodge resurrected the Challenger with retro styling and a Hemi V8. It was a throwback designed to print money on nostalgia, and it worked. The Charger became the last affordable four-door V8 sedan in America. Ford kept the Mustang. Chevy had the Camaro. But Dodge went further. The Hellcat, 707 horsepower. The Demon, 840 horsepower. The Superstock. Customers lined up and dealers added markups. Over the full run, more than 726,000 Challengers were sold in the US. From the outside, it looked like rebellion. The last American brand still building unapologetically loud, fast, gas-burning cars, while every competitor was chasing crossovers and hybrids. But behind the roar, the bill was stacking up in a way no press release mentioned. Stellantis, formed in 2021 from the merger of Fiat Chrysler and France's PSA Group, had the worst real-world fleet fuel economy of any major U.S. automaker. 21.3 miles per gallon in 2021, dead last. And Fiat Chrysler had been paying for that position for years, not just in CAFE fines, but in something arguably more revealing. They were paying Tesla. From 2019 to 2021, FCA sent roughly $2.4 billion to Tesla to pool emissions credits in Europe and purchase zero-emission vehicle credits in the United States. That money didn't buy cars. It didn't build factories. It bought permission to keep selling V8s. And here is the part that should make you sit up. Tesla's total profit in 2020 was $721 million. Tesla's regulatory credit revenue that same year was $1.58 billion. Fiat Chrysler wasn't just paying a fine. It was functionally underwriting Tesla's profitability so it could keep building Hellcats. On top of that, Stellantis's direct CAFE penalties since 2018 have totaled $773.5 million and are climbing. The single largest individual penalty in the history of the program, $235.6 million, was levied against Stellantis for model years 2018 and 2019. The muscle car was selling. Enthusiasts were buying. Dodge was growing its cult. But the cost of maintaining that cult, in fines and credits paid to a direct competitor, in escalating regulatory exposure, was compounding underneath the surface like debt nobody talked about at the party. Then the pressure got worse. Under the Biden administration, NHTSA tightened CAFE targets from roughly 28 miles per gallon to 40. The agency projected the entire auto industry could face $14 billion in penalties between 2027 and 2031 if standards held. For Stellantis, with its truck and muscle car heavy lineup, that wasn't a warning. It was an existential number. Enter Carlos Tavares, the Portuguese-born, European-trained CEO of Stellantis, the man who now ran what used to be Chrysler, Dodge, Jeep, and Ram from a boardroom an ocean away. Tavares committed $50 billion globally to electrification. He shut down the Brampton plant's 20-year muscle car run. He greenlit the Charger Daytona EV. And he positioned the entire move as inevitable, not as a choice, but as the only rational future. The industry echoed him. Ford had already killed its sedans. GM had already gutted its car lineup. Every legacy automaker was sprinting toward EVs. The message to the public was clear. This is what consumers want. But the truth underneath was simpler and colder. This is what the compliance math requires. Nobody asked the buyer what they wanted. They told the buyer what was coming and called it progress. Then the Charger Daytona EV launched, and nobody showed up. It wasn't slow. It had 670 horsepower and could hit 60 in the mid 3-second range. On paper, it outperformed every Hemi Charger ever made. But muscle car buyers don't buy spreadsheets. They buy sound, identity, ritual. The Daytona offered a speaker that hummed where an engine used to roar, and a starting price that crept past $60,000 before options. Full year 2025 Dodge sales collapsed 28%, dropping from 141,730 to 101,927 units. Every single model in the Dodge lineup declined. The Charger Daytona sold 7,421 units for the year, and then cratered to just 346 in Q4 after the federal EV tax credit was pulled. 346 cars, nationwide, in 3 months, for the brand's flagship. Compare that to Ford, which moved over 9,300 Mustangs in Q1 2025 alone, gas-powered naturally, even while its own sales were falling. Dodge quietly pulled the entry-level Charger Daytona RT from the 2026 lineup. The official reason was tariff uncertainty. The actual reason was rows of unsold inventory and a customer base that had made its preference violently clear. And then came the reversal nobody in the EV narrative was supposed to see. Stellantis announced the Charger 6-pack, a gas-powered, twin-turbocharged inline-six making 550 horsepower in Scat Pack trim. More power than the old Hemi V8. Production moved forward. Reports surfaced that Dodge was actively working to fit the Hemi V8 back into the new Charger platform for late 2026. Dodge CEO Matt McAleer, asked whether a Hellcat engine would fit under the new hood, responded with 5 words: "Don't be surprised if it would fit." The engine they buried was being exhumed. Carlos Tavares, the man who built the electrification roadmap, who committed the billions, who told the market this was the future, resigned in late 2024 under pressure from the Stellantis board. Within months of his departure, V8s returned to the Ram 1500. The Dodge Durango went V8 only. The Hemi comeback accelerated. The architect of the EV pivot was gone, and his blueprint was being dismantled in real time. Then the regulatory ground itself shifted. The Trump administration's One Big Beautiful Bill zeroed out CAFE penalties from model year 2022 onward. The fines that had justified killing the muscle car, the hundreds of millions that made Hellcats a balance sheet liability, were erased. The entire compliance pressure that had been cited as the reason the V8 had to die was, at least for now, legislated away. The American muscle car was killed twice. Once in the 1970s by regulation. Once in the 2020s by regulation. Both times the automakers said the market had moved on. Both times the same CAFE loophole that made trucks wildly profitable made cars expendable. Both times the car came back because the demand never went anywhere. But someone always pays. The buyer who put down $60,000 on a Charger Daytona EV because they were told it was the future watched $25,000 in value vanish within months as lots filled and discounts exploded. The worker at Brampton watched a 20-year production run go dark. The enthusiast was told their car was history, and then watched a discontinued Challenger outsell its own replacement from beyond the grave. The muscle car was never a casualty of progress. It was a casualty of compliance math, the kind of math built on a loophole written in 1975, refined by lobbyists for 50 years, and used by the same companies that sold you a V8 with one hand to justify killing it with the other. They didn't stop making muscle cars because people stopped wanting them. They stopped because the regulatory structure they helped design made every unit sold a fine they'd rather not pay. while every truck rolled off the line printing money under softer rules they'd lobbied to keep. That's not a transition. That's an arbitrage. And the muscle car was just the cost of doing it.